Okay, Year 7, welcome to your video tutorial on the Cartesian plane. You don't have to write this down. I do need you to have a heading that says Cartesian plane, but I just wanted to give you a bit of prep as to what we have been looking at so far. So far with negative integers, we've looked at adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing, and I've given you this little guy here, okay, as a tool in order to use when trying to add or subtract negative integers. We called him a number plane. And he had a 0 here and positive numbers going that way and negative numbers going that way. Now this one only goes to 10, so from negative 10 to positive 10, but it can go further. Okay, some of you I only had up to negative 5. It just keeps on going and going and going depending on how many numbers you need. Okay, but there's always a 0 in the middle and there's always positive one way and negative the other way. Today we are going to look at something that is a little bit similar but more of a hybrid version of the number plane. So let's begin. I need you to draw down and write down everything on this page. Today we are going to have a look at a Cartesian plane. So before we begin writing this down and discussing it, have a look over here at this diagram here. This is what a Cartesian plane looks like, and if you look very closely, all it is a number line going that way and a number line going that way, and this middle point in here is the 0 for both of those number lines. Okay, so I'm not really introducing you to anything too new today, I'm just showing you a different version of the same thing. Okay, so I need you to draw down this example, okay, this number line, making sure that we remember to use a ruler, okay, and I need you to write the following down. The Cartesian plane consists of two axes, okay, two axes, okay. The horizontal axis is called the x-axis. Now, remembering horizontal is flat, or this one here, I call this one the x-axis, okay, so I always have it labelled x. Okay, this is my x-axis. Okay, my vertical axis, or the one standing up like this, is called my y-axis. Okay, y-axis. And we're going to have a look in a minute how these are important. Okay, so that's my y-axis. I need you to draw this down, mark the x and y, so you might want to pause your video right now. Okay. So when we look at our Cartesian plane, the first thing that we have to know is that there is 4 different quadrants, okay? Or there's 4 different little sections that make up our Cartesian plane, okay? And I'd like you to again draw this diagram underneath, like the identical one you had at the top, okay? And I'd like you to mark in the quadrants. We call this one quadrant 1, this one quadrant 2, this one quadrant 3, and this one quadrant 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. At the centre of my number plane, this point just here, where 0 is represented, we call that the origin. I'd also like you to mark that in on your map, the origin. Okay, so quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4, and the origin. Now, if you look at the Cartesian plane, it's almost like a mini map, okay? And there's lots of different points on the Cartesian plane that we can locate or be asked to find. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to write down these words on this right-hand side here, okay? And they say, when we locate or mark points on our Cartesian plane, we do this based on the numbers on the x and the y axes. We write these points down with the number on the x-axis first and then the y-axis. So we write them with the x-axis first and then the y-axis. How we mark these and how we write them, we call those coordinates. Okay? Now, most of you probably followed me up to the quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4 and origin point, but some of you might be now sitting there after writing that going, what in the earth is Mr. Corsi talking about? So I'm going to show you a few examples. Make sure you get all of that written down. Okay, you might need to pause your video tutorial and then I'll show you what I mean. Okay, here's a blank Cartesian plane. I again need you to draw this down, and I'm going to need you to draw down the examples. Okay, I'm going to map something on my plot. Okay, I'm going to put a little dot on this point just here. Okay, sorry it's a bit of a dodgy dot, but that's going to be my dot. Okay, now if I get asked what's the coordinates for the red dot, what's the coordinates for the red dot, okay, first thing I have to do is I have to start at my origin. So I start at this little point in the middle. Okay, I start here. And if you remember, or you can look at what you've written down, it says I start with my x, the number on the x-axis first. So I go along and I say, where does that hit on the x-axis? Okay, that hits at positive 3. Okay. So I write down 3, comma, because it's a coordinate. Then I go back to the origin and I say, okay, where does it hit on the y-axis? And I go up and I see it's again positive 3. So my coordinate is x3, y3, and I write it like that. Okay, that's the coordinate for the red dot, x3, y3. And I'll draw that red dot back in there for you guys. Okay, what about a blue dot down here? What about this blue dot down here? What would be the coordinates for that? So again, what I do is I start at my origin in the center here and I move along my x-axis, okay? And as I move along, I can see it hits at positive 2, okay? Because along my x-axis, it's hitting positive 2. Because when I go down, that's where it's hitting along my x-axis. Now, along my y-axis, I start at the origin. Okay, but this time I'm going in the opposite direction. So I'm going to be getting into negative numbers. Okay, so I go down and I realize it's hitting at negative 3. Okay, so on my y, it's coming up as negative 3. Okay, now let's have a look at another example. Let's have a look at one more example. I'm just going to, I can't get rid of that. Let's just have a look at one last example. I'm going to do it over here. Okay. Okay, so what are the coordinates for the green point? Well, again, I start at the origin here. I start at the center point, and I have a look at where it is on my x-axis here. Okay, sorry I can't rub out the previous one. For some reason, it's not letting me do it. Anyway. I noticed that on my x-axis, I don't move to the right or positive. I'm actually moving towards the negative, okay? And on the x-axis, this green dot is hitting at negative 3. Okay, so that's the point at which it is sitting on the x-axis. So my x point is negative 3. Okay, to get my y coordinate, I go back to the origin and I say, okay, am I going negative or positive? Okay, I'm going positive. And I go up. And it's hitting at positive 2. Okay, so it's hitting at positive 2 here. So my coordinate for this one would be negative 3, positive 2. Negative 3, positive 2. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can rub out as much of this as I can. Beautiful. Okay, so that's how you do it with points. Then let's say, for example, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Then let's say, for example, instead I got given the points and I was asked to map them. Say I got given these points, negative 3, 4, 4, negative 2, and 5, 4. Okay, I've been asked to map 3 points, so I'll start with the first one. I'll start with this one here. I know that my first number is on the x-axis. My first coordinate is on the x-axis. So I start at my origin. Oh, I don't know why I have a red one in there. That's a bit odd, isn't it? Okay, let's see if I can get rid of that. There we go. Okay, I start on my x-axis and I start at the origin. My first point, my first point is negative 3. So I go all the way down here to negative 3. And then it says it's positive 4. So I go back to the origin and I go up to positive 4. and I go along, and I go up, which must mean that that point in there is where that coordinate sits. -3, +4. Let's try it with this one here. I start on my origin, I go across to -4. I then go back to the origin, and I go down to -2 on my y-axis, which must mean the point is in there. That one more time, +4 on the x-axis, -2 on the y-axis gives me this point in here. Okay, and lucky last here, I'll just get rid of this, beautiful. Lucky last in here, I have this one here, +5, +4. Okay, start on my x-axis, I go across to 5, I go up to 4, and I go down there. Okay, I'll give you one more actually. What about -2, -4? Okay, last but not least, -2, -4. Okay, just so we hit all the quadrants. Again, I start on my center or on my origin point, which is 0. I go across to -2, which gets me that guy there. Okay, I then go back to the origin, I go down to -4, which must mean that across and down, that is my point just there. That one just there. What you need to remember, guys, with Cartesian planes and coordinates, I always start with my x-axis first. I always start with then I follow it by the y-axis. The way I get given my points is always that way, x first, y second. Okay, and a reminder of how these are labelled. This red point would be in quadrant 1. Okay, this green point would be in quadrant 2. This purple point would be in quadrant 3, and this blue point would be in quadrant 4, because this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. And that's it, guys. That is the basics of the Cartesian plane.